You're probably wondering why I'm telling this story. Hell, I've asked myself that same question 1,000 times since it happened, but I can't keep it bottled up inside anymore. The nightmares, the visions, the creeping sense of dread that never goes away. I need to get it out there, and maybe, just maybe, that will allow me to begin healing from whatever the hell that was in the woods. It started out innocently enough. Just a weekend camping trip up in the mountains to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The six of us had been buddies since college, bonded by a shared love of outdoor adventures. So when Derek suggested we hit up a new camping spot near Miller's Creek for some hiking, fishing, and campfire beers, we all jumped at the chance. The winding mountain road seemed to stretch on forever as we made our way up the canyon, trees and cliffs enveloping us. An excited energy filled the truck, everyone swapping stories and razzing each other like we'd done 100 times before on these trips. Little did we know, we were venturing straight into the nightmarish unknown. After setting up our tents near the creek under a canopy of pines, we settled in for a night of camping revelry. A few too many cold ones around the crackling fire led to loud jokes and laughter, echoing through those once serene woods. I vaguely remember crawling into my tent as the embers died out, the muffled snores of my friends drifting across the campsite. But then, something startled me awake. A faint sound in the distance that instantly lanced through my inebriated haze like ice water. At first I thought maybe a coyote or some other small creature was roaming nearby. But as I lay there holding my breath, I realized this was no animal. It was an unmistakable, blood-curdling scream ripping through the silence of the night. A shriek so agonizing and primal that it made my stomach knot. I jolted upright, straining my ears for any other sound as my heart pounded in my chest. Had I imagined it? Was this some kind of twisted prank? Peering out through the tent flap, I could make out the shadowy forms of my friends' tents, unmoving and undisturbed. Just then, the scream tore through the air again, this time much closer and more harrowing. Without a second thought, I scrambled out of the tent and grabbed the nearest flashlight, its beam sweeping over the scrub brush and boulders near the creek. "Hello? Who's out there?" I yelled with as much bravado as I could muster. That's when I noticed it. A dim glow emanating from a spot near the water's edge, about 50 yards away, flickering and pulsating like a dying flame. As quietly as I could, I made my way toward this strange light, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach with each step. The beam of my flashlight soon revealed the source of the ghastly illumination. A series of candles scattered haphazardly along the rocky bank, some still burning while others appeared to have been snuffed out in haste. Circling around for a better vantage point, an even more hellish scene was unveiled before me. There, nestled against a gnarled tree trunk, was an ancient, cracked altar covered in dark stains and surrounded by scattered, flickering candles. The sinister glow cast eerie shadows on the forest floor, revealing symbols and runes etched deeply into the wood, suggesting rituals long forgotten yet ominously alive in this forsaken place. That's when I saw movement from the corner of my eye near the tree line. A shadowy figure emerging from the woods like a wraith. My heart seized in my chest as I watched this dark entity glide toward the altar with an unnatural, jerky gait. Despite its vaguely humanoid shape, there was something inexplicably unholy about this entity, like it was stitched together from the darkest of nightmares. "Oh God," I muttered under my breath, my flashlight suddenly feeling like a feeble shield against the primordial evil unfolding before me. In one deft motion, the shadowy creature snatched a rusted, ceremonial blade from atop the altar and began to carve into the ancient wood with deliberate, savage strokes. Each cut seemed to release a haunting echo of screams that penetrated my very soul, as if the altar itself were crying out in agony. Stunned by horror, I could only watch helplessly as this nightmare unfolded. The sound of the blade carving wood mingling with the whispers of the wind until they ceased altogether. Silence once again blanketed the woods, broken only by my own ragged breathing. The figure stood still for an eternal moment, clutching the blood-stained blade, seemingly savoring its sinister act. I wanted to run to escape the horror I had stumbled upon, but I was rooted in place, petrified, just as it felt like my sanity would shatter altogether. A bright light nearly blinded me, jolting me into action. I whipped my head around to see the beam of a flashlight sweeping crazily through the trees. It was one of my friends, delirious with sleep, but drawn towards the commotion. And with his emergence, the dreadful specter seemed to take notice of my presence at last. Suddenly, the creature's head snapped up and seemed to lock its soulless gaze directly on me, freezing the blood in my veins. In one terrifying motion, it turned and began lurching up the ravine straight toward me with that unnatural, disjointed stride, each powerful step covering far more ground than should have been physically possible. That's when the instinct of self-preservation finally kicked in. With a frantic shout to the others, I spun on my heels and sprinted back toward the campsite, panic fueling my every stride as I crashed through bushes and hurtled over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear the abomination's disturbingly rapid footfalls closing in, snapping branches like twigs as it gave chase. By some miracle, I reached our campsite with the unholy beast still in pursuit. Praying desperately that all of my buddies are still here sleeping, I started frantically unzipping tents and shouting at the top of my lungs. "Wake up! Wake up! We've got to get out of here, now!" One by one, my groggy friends began to emerge, fear and confusion etched across their faces at my frantic screams. That's when the first rocks and clods of dirt began to pummel us, a ghastly howl ripping through the night. The creature had arrived at the edge of our campsite, but it didn't charge into the fray. Instead, it stood there glaring at us with those black, lifeless pits where eyes should have been, the blade in its hand slick and dripping with an unknown liquid. My mind refusing to believe it could be anything other than blood. I tried to make out its features in the ambient light, but there was nothing remotely human about it. It was big, at least 8 feet tall, with a humanoid shape, but hunched over with large, elongated appendages. Its skin seemed to glisten like dripping muscle, raw and pulsating. I couldn't make out any distinct features, but its movements were jerky and unnatural, like its very existence went against the laws of nature itself. My friends were now fully awake, frozen in terror before the monstrosity stalking the edge of our campsite. No words passed between us, as if speaking might entice the creature closer and seal our fates. I don't know what finally made it turn. The entity let out one ear-splitting screech that felt like shards of ice piercing my brain. And then it turned and retreated in that same unnatural gait from whence it came, disappearing back into the shadows of the forest as quickly as it had first emerged. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one dared to speak as we frantically broke down camp and jammed our supplies into the truck, not knowing if the creature would return. Huddled inside the cab like frightened children, the only words uttered were whispers of desperate prayer that we'd make it out of those hellish woods alive. The truck's headlights finally pierced through the morning fog, and we caught our first glimpse of paved road in the distance. It was as if an invisible vice had finally released its grip on our souls. The rolling mountain highway stretched before us, beckoning us back to the light and logic of civilization. As we barreled down the mountain road and eventually back to civilization, no one spoke about what we had seen. What could we possibly say? How could any sane person comprehend what we just witnessed? That thing? So heed my warning, campers and outdoor folk. Some things dwell in the dark, forgotten recesses of the untamed wilderness. Tread carefully beneath those starry nights, friends, and pray that the veil between reality and the nightmare realm remains closed to you.